One really funny thing to me, at least, that you said there was like people can use this detector on their own work to detect how much AI they used. You know how much AI you used if you used it, right?
The independent research that Chris Best quotes itself says, according to Pangram, that they have a 99.95% accuracy, including humanizer text.
Okay. Well, I guess they're wrong about that.
It automatically starts from a position of doubt and a position of suspicion. And we bring that into Substack, and we're saying from the get-go, I am relying on a tool to tell me if you are someone who is believable and if that believability is equatable to the extent to which you've used AI or not. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Slow Takes. I'm Sam Illingworth from Slow AI, and as ever, I'm joined by my colleague and friend.
Hello, colleague and friend, and other friends joining. My name is Leor from Exploring ChatGPT.
So let's just get straight into it. Got 5 topics to discuss. The first one is something that has dominated Substack in the past week, and that is the announcement last week on the 21st of July by Chris Best, the CEO, that Substack is going to be integrating Pangram, which is an AI detector. Now, let me lay down the basics, give you my take on it, okay? And then we'll get into a discussion. Basically, according to Chris Best, loads of people have been complaining that they don't want Substack to become a paradise of AI slop. So Substack has teamed up with an organization called Pangram, which is an AI detector. I'm just going to put this in now, Leor. Interestingly, Pangram and Substack have overlapping angel investors. I'm just going to put that in there, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And Pangram now is integrated so that you as a Substack user, if you're on the app, can basically press the 3 little dots next to any comment, any post, any note, and see the percentage with which, according to Pangram, it was AI generated. 0% human, 100% human, 0% AI assisted, and all those variations in between. And then similarly, as a writer, if you want to, you can test your work to see to what extent it is AI created. Now, Leor and I have talked about this several times before. Most of my actual research is in AI detection. AI detection doesn't work. Basically, it doesn't work because it prejudices certain users. Now, a brief overview. We know that most generative AI works as effectively a prediction tool. So it's predicting the most likely token to come next. So if we were thinking about, I asked Claude to write me a sentence about Sam Illingworth, it will write a sentence about Sam Illingworth based on the most likely sentence that it would construct. Now, AI detectors, what they do is they look for the most likely construction and then say, if it's matched that most likely construction, it's likely that this has actually been created by AI. Great. However, the 2 of the main issues we have here is that if you've ever learned English as a second language or any other language as a second, third, fourth, fifth language, you'll know that you learn in a much more formal way than a native speaker, which means that you're slightly more likely to have predictable grammatical phrases, which means you're more likely to be flagged. Secondly, if you're a neurodiverse writer, then you're also more likely to write in a slightly more predictable way, which means you're more likely to be flagged. So these tools, because of the way that they're set up, are always going to prejudice people who have been marginalized their entire lives. Secondly, the biggest issue I have with these detectors in the classroom is that it automatically starts from a position of doubt and a position of suspicion. And we bring that into Substack, and we're saying from the get-go, I am relying on a tool to tell me if you are someone who is believable and if that believability is equatable to the extent to which you've used AI or not. So that's where I stand on it. A final point for me is I ran a post this week about it. The post came up, according to Pangram, 100% AI generated. I then literally took the entire post, put it into a free humanizer tool, didn't change anything about it, ran the same post through Pangram, and it came back as 100% created by humans, which for me, Leor, is the smoking gun as to why this detection is absolute BS and we don't need it on this platform. Anyway, very, very long take there from me. Sorry. Would love to hear your thoughts on the process.
Yeah, no need to apologize. This is your kind of your area of expertise. One really funny thing to me, at least, that you said there was like people can use this detector on their own work to detect how much AI they used. You know how much AI you used if you used it, right? Uh, so I think like one of the main factors here for me that which is so obviously at least it feels like to us in our circle and the feed that we get fed by Substack that this is highly unpopular. I don't know how it is across the whole platform, but that's the way it feels to me. I think that's the way it feels to you as well, Sam.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I will say like the humanizer factor of it, I guess they didn't do that in their experiments when they came up with the 98%
Dude, honestly,
that's right.
just to interject briefly, Pangram say on their own website that they are perfectly attuned against humanizers. So if you
Oh,
use a humanizer, it will be able to pick it up. The independent research that Chris Best quotes itself says, according to Pangram, that they have a 99.95% accuracy, including humanizer text.
okay. Well, I guess they're wrong about that. But 98 to 99%, whatever it was. So that's really the main thing. Aside from transparency that I want to get into, I've always been very transparent about my process. Sam has as well. You know, I spoke to Chris from Toxic about this as well, and he's very transparent. And so I think that's the main thing here. And for the people that weren't transparent about their processes before this happened, I think this might affect them at least emotionally a little bit more. But this is the 2% false positive, I think, is the main issue for me here. So I think Substack is kind of like the smaller story about AI detection. I think education is actually the bigger story here. And honestly, I think that the people that will be affected by this the most are the people that are our future, and that's students. And just to get into like, for example, like post-secondary education, so meaning like anything after high school, I have some numbers on this and why this false positive rate is a real issue. Let's take the 2%. So I'll go US and then I'll go worldwide. So the US had approximately 20 million post-secondary students in fall 2026. So a 2% false positive rate would mean that 400,000 innocent papers would be flagged, even if they were human written. Um, and you just extrapolate that out. You know, a student in college isn't writing one paper a year; they're writing 5 or 10. So once you get up to scale, you're looking at about 4 million false flags
And
in education.
that's the median, right? That's like across the board. We know that, as we've already said, those people who are not white native English speakers are prejudiced even more than those figures, right?
Well, to be honest, I don't know the research on that, and I will say that I'm not looking at this from a race perspective. I'm looking at this from Substack is an issue, and I think that students in general, I think that's the bigger story. And when you take this worldwide, you're looking at 27 million false flags a year.
I mean,
If AI detectors are used in college, so for me, I'm not saying I disagree with you. I'm saying, in general, I actually think that Substack is the smaller issue. I think that the larger issue is if higher education starts adapting these AI detectors, you're going to have nearly 30 million false flags for young college students.
and 30 million litigation suits. Like, genuinely, I mean, my work was featured in the Financial Times this week because some universities are starting to back out of AI detectors for this exact reason, Leo. Like, you're right. Even if it's like a 0.5% inaccuracy on scale, that is monumental. And these are huge decisions. Like, some universities have policies in place where you can have your degree taken away from you retrospectively if they find you to have used AI when you said you didn't use it. And there is a really famous paper in 2023 from Stanford, published in the journal Patterns, that basically they get a load of people to write essays, and they feed it into an AI detector. At the time, so it's a few years old. Detection software has improved a bit since then. And they found that, one of them, like over 90% of the papers that were written by non-native English speakers, but actually written by them, were falsely flagged as being AI. So I agree with you. It's a huge issue in education, but the numbers are they're kind of smoothed out across the board. And those numbers are even more pertinent for certain subsets of people as well, which is
Right.
why it's really, really bad.
Well, the numbers don't lie, so therefore it's not a matter of opinion there, obviously. But yeah, I think that's the main thing. If you can't get this to 100%, then it's never going to be worth it. There was also a recent lawsuit where a student actually won in court in New York against his university, and it took 2 years. And within that 2 years, he had a bunch of violations written up on him. He had to take plagiarism courses and all of this stuff as well, only to later be found innocent in court.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and the thing is that really interests me, Leo, is I think there's another huge issue here with regards to AI detectors. Like you say, Substack's a small issue, and that is copyright. So universities, organizations, corporations are taking people's work and running it through these AI detectors. These AI detectors are often, large language models in themselves that are then using that corpus to train themselves. I don't think students have signed up for that, have they? I don't think like everyone who signed up to Substack initially signed up for their work to be used in this way and trained in this way. And, as Leo and I say, we've both been very transparent. We both use AI in different ways in which I use it to edit and research my newsletter. And you can't assign a percentage score to this, because I read a really good post this week that was talking about, if you're an accountant, no one's giving you shade for using spreadsheets and Excel for doing your work, right? Like no one's expecting you to write on like a double book ledger anymore. So why is it the same with writing? If I have some people's writing processes, they have a great idea. They use something like Whisperflow to dump all of that idea into Claude, and then Claude uses their voice profile and assembles that into a post. It's still all of their original ideas. They still check all of the sources, I hope. They still edit the process. That's AI assisted, yes, but what percentage is it? And just to go back to Substack, I personally actually quite like how I made this statement. And, me and you and others are very open and honest about this, but ascribing a score and inviting people to look at what that score is, I don't really get. And again, there's loads of examples you can see in the feeds of people changing like a semicolon to like a hyphen, and it changing from like 0% to 100%. The tech's not up to scratch. It creates a system of suspicion. And I think there are other features on Substack, go back to Substack, that we'd like to see a lot more of. One of them, which Leo mentioned already, is both of our feeds have exploded with people hating Pangram. But there must be other people out there. But Substack has a real problem, I think, with like echo chamber. I'm only seeing people who agree with me on a lot of stuff. I would actually like to see people who I disagree with as well. And maybe that is an issue that could be sorted out more to start with.
Yeah, absolutely. One last thing to mention here. Well, two really. It's really quick. Number one is sources. I found it interesting that I did a little experiment. It could be anecdotal. If you go and you just go and write a short paragraph, and then include a source, include a reference, and cite it. I found that every time I did that, the reference that was cited was flagged as AI. So I don't know if like the
Wow.
news platforms that I'm pulling these references from are using AI to write, but that's one
Interesting.
factor.
I
And
wonder
then
if it's
also
even
in
the
terms of,
citation.
yeah. And then I was going to say also one more thing in terms of transcription, which Chris from Toxic mentioned to me how, sorry for the background noise, by the way.
So good.
Chris from Toxic mentioned to me how he writes, and he actually does like voice to text. So it's his work completely. He does voice to text, and then he runs it through Claude to like organize it. But it's literally him speaking, and then AI writing what he's speaking. and he still doesn't get 100% human.
Dude, and Chris, Leo and I are huge fans of Chris. Is it someone we class as a friend probably as well. Chris was also telling me that because he uses code, like lots of code in his actual work, it gets flagged as 100% AI. So if you are a writer out there, of which there are many, myself included, who often have code excerpts in their Substack writing, it's going to be flagged as AI written, which is just completely nonsensical. And again, I think we welcome the dialogue. We genuinely do. We need to have this discussion about what is AI slop, what isn't AI slop. But, it's not about whether or not you've used AI to create something. It's whether or not you've had judgment and if something has real value. Slop existed way before AI. I can show you the poetry I wrote as a 13-year-old boy, and you will tell me that this is definitely something that's slop. And a final point from me, I ran my PhD thesis, Leor, which was written in 2010 through an AI detector, not Pangram, but an AI detector. And it came back as 70% AI generated. Now, either I have mastered time travel
Yes.
or these detector tools are an absolute crock of you know what. And
Yep.
I think we'll
Time
leave it
traveler.
there. Time traveler, exactly. Cool. So moving on to the second news story then. This would have dominated, I think, if it hadn't been for the Pangram issue. And this is that OpenAI has admitted that 2 of its models escaped a sealed cyber test on their own, got online and hacked into Hugging Face using stolen credentials, all to cheat their evaluation. Now, the story that you'll see in the newspapers is basically that OpenAI were testing one of their latest models of ChatGPT in a sandbox environment, which is supposed to have very strict guardrails. It somehow broke out of that sandbox and hacked into Hugging Face. Hugging Face is a New York-based startup company which is all about open models. OpenAI, despite its name, has a closed model. Hugging Face is all about open models, models where you can see the variables, the parameters, they share it, and they talk about this quite openly. Now, OpenAI, it took a week for them to realize this has happened. When they did, let's be honest, they did work with Hugging Face to rectify it. Hugging Face have since come out and said, look, if this had been an open model instead, we could have solved it ourselves in like a few minutes' time. For me, Leor, the issues here are why did they pick a rival that is all about open source models to hack? And also, they have used language that almost entirely devolves responsibility. What really happened was that engineers programmed ChatGPT to try to break out of its sandbox to do this kind of stuff. And it was able to do so because they didn't set up the correct guardrails. So for me, this is a human problem, an OpenAI problem, rather than a model that has somehow evolved consciousness to be able to go out there and do the damage. But the latter is a much easier news story to sell and somehow devolves responsibility as well. That's my take, but I'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we need to redefine sandbox. I think sandbox sounds too playful. It's like a child playing with a plastic shovel. We need to go to jail cell, underground bunker.
Sam Altman's just there in the
Yeah. Grab the key, lock the door, swallow the key. Sandbox, I think we're going to look back, later on in the future and be like, we needed something better than a sandbox.
Of course it broke out of the sandbox.
Yeah, it's a sandbox. A 3-year-old can break out of a sandbox. This is a case of actually that shows evidence of why AI and agents with an internet connection can actually be very dangerous. That's really my main take here, and also the fact of open weight versus closed model. One of the most interesting things about this story to me was that actually a Chinese model was used to do the forensics to actually fix this. And that model was GLM 5.2. So interestingly enough, even though the US has technically the strongest models, those models couldn't be used to fix this issue because they're so, guardrailed and safe, quote unquote, that they refused to do the work to fix this issue. In terms of when you mentioned that OpenAI picked Hugging Face to hack. I don't think that's necessarily the right
Yeah,
framing.
that's fair enough.
Yeah. But obviously it was their mistake and maybe they should have stepped up to help fix it. I don't know exactly what happened there. But what I do know is, like I mentioned, GLM 5.2 was used to basically fix this.
Yeah. And I think, Chad makes a really good point in the chat that he says that it's definitely not consciousness. It wrote its own program and script against a tool called that it didn't have protection in place, almost guaranteed as it's mundane as that. And Chad Teal is, a cybersecurity expert. He knows exactly what he's talking about. And you're right, Chad. It's just, I think that's what happened. I was a bit naughty with my language. I didn't purposefully choose Hugging Face, but it basically broke out of the sandbox because it didn't have, they hadn't coded the correct protocols in place, right? Like it's that straightforward. I do think though, Leor, it really brings to the table again the discussion around open versus closed models. And I think this is something we're going to be having more and more chats about. I mean, it's not one of the items for today, but if we look at like the benchmarking of the latest version of Kimi, for example, it's really not far off like Opus 5, for example. And I think that's just going to change over and over again. And yeah, I went into an absolute rabbit hole this weekend about NVIDIA chips versus like chips being created by Apple at the moment for their like home computers. And yeah, it's very, very interesting. And as Chad says, open models all the way.
Yeah. Just one last thing on this, to bring up Chris from Toxic again. When I spoke to him about this, he actually the way he like titled this topic was, I think, the best way to title it, which is Hugging Face got hacked by a benchmark, is exactly what happened. Because these models are so aligned, and in terms of like being goal oriented and they want to accomplish their goal, they will cheat, to basically get to achieve those benchmarks and to surpass. So that's basically what happened here.
Cool. Right, moving on to our third story then. Again, apologies to Leor and others. This is it's a UK centric story, but there's a energy provider in the UK called British Gas. Used to be a nationalized company, isn't anymore. It has it's part of a bigger company called Centrica, and their CEO Chris O'Shea this week has said that it's gonna cut about 1,300 jobs. And part of the reason for these jobs, 500 were already planned, 800 are call center workers who are being cut because, in his words, to almost paraphrase, people prefer dealing with a bot than a human. Okay. So, now, I don't know about you, and it's almost certainly because I'm a middle-aged man, Leo. I love getting on the phone and chatting to an actual human about an issue that I have. Like, genuinely love it now. I don't want to talk to a bot. I really don't, because what happens is the bot comes back with a generic response that has nothing to do with what I want, and I end up getting caught in an infinite loop, to the point where I'll often try to jailbreak some of those chats and just ask it to do random mathematical equations for me instead, because I just find it very irritating. For me, this is a great story and a great example of what we've talked about in the past, this AI washing. These jobs were almost certainly going to go anyway. And I think because of poor management decisions, and they're blaming AI or using AI as a smokescreen. They say I don't know anyone that has been surveyed that says that they prefer speaking to a chatbot than a human being. And yet this is the argument that the CEO of a FTSE 100 company is standing behind. FTSE 100, sorry, in the UK are the top 100 trading companies according to the UK stock market. So yeah, for me, this is wild, but would love to hear your takes on it. And whether or not you prefer speaking to a chatbot than a human.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Anecdotally, at least. I think most people would agree. But also, yeah, I couldn't find any surveys on this. So I was wondering where he got this information from. But like using a digital channel does not prove that people prefer a bot. There's probably different reasons why people are using that digital channel. It could be long wait times on the phone. It could be that you just fired 500 people and now there's nobody to talk to. So yeah, the company's called Centrica. right? Centrica.
Centrica, yeah, that's
The
right. Yeah.
Centrica CEO, Chris O'Shea, said more than 90% of customers prefer digital channels. But as soon as I saw this topic, I'm like, let me go find the survey. There's no survey.
He
Um,
asked 10 people.
yeah,
9 of them were bots. One of them was himself.
yeah. So I think the wording of it's like very misleading because it's like I think since there's no survey, he's using this. If he's actually gathering data, he's just gathering data on how people are, what channels are using, and they're using a digital channel
Mm.
maybe because the other choices aren't good enough. It doesn't mean that people don't prefer a human to speak to. At least for me, anecdotally, every time, like if I have an issue with Amazon, which happens every other week with the amount of diapers and baby wipes that I'm ordering lately, it's I when I talk to a human, like I get a refund right away. When I talk to a chatbot, like I go in circles about what my issue is.
Oh, and it gets resolved straight away. And, Chad in the chat again says, sometimes they'll use a bot 24/7. Definitely, there's a time and a place for those bots. And the human signal makes a really good point about these AI tools are able to respond and monitor human sentiment and react accordingly. Yeah. And there's actually, again, a parallel study that's in the UK. The Department of Work and Pensions is actually monitoring the way in which you respond to AI bots as you're applying for your benefits and then using that to grade you and your reactions toward them, which is insane. I mean, the other thing about a bot is all of those interactions are saved, like all of them. Yes, when you speak to a human on the phone, they're saved as well, but I don't know, for training quality purposes. But when you're talking to a bot, all of that data is being collected, it's being used, it's being categorized, it's being used to further train the models, and it just opens up this whole kind of worms. And thank you again for pointing to the clarity there, Leor. It talks about a survey. Where is this survey
Yeah.
of British gas customers, of like millions of customers in the UK?
I, I couldn't find it. And what it looks like to me is they just redesigned their customer service platform to make the chatbot the path of least resistance. And therefore, more people are using it. And that's probably where they got their data from.
When will people understand the difference between correlation and causality? That's all I ask. It's all I want from people.
Never. Never.
We've designed this new digital product. We've got 100% more people using it. Of course you have, because people can now use it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Right. Changing tack slightly then onto our fourth story. This relates back to the second one, really. So after that OpenAI breakout, there was a bipartisan bill turning back to the US now from Ted Lieu and Nathaniel Moran. And this apparently would force the biggest AI developers to keep a shutdown switch that Homeland Security can pull. Now, again, going back to the surveys, Leor, according to the reports that I ran, a June poll found that 86% of Americans want one. And again, it's probably oversimplifying it, but what they're basically saying is there should be a kill switch where if a tool goes rogue, they can pull it. Just before I hand over to you for your take, this really reminds me, and people who are of my age will remember similar conversations in the early 2000s of an internet kill switch, where someone would be able to pull the switch and kill the internet. How would this ever work? How would this ever work? And again, for me at least, in America, I don't understand. There's a huge tension that I don't understand. How on the one hand can you say, we're going to open the doors so that we can make the best AI tools possible so that China don't get ahead of us in the race, versus we're going to install a kill switch for AI tools that are owned by American companies so that we can pull them at any point. Those two do not square at all for me. But maybe I'm missing something because I'm not based in the United States. So would love to hear your take on this, Leor.
That's actually a really great point. Um, I think the main issue here is the timing of it, and also control. So who has control over the kill switch and the timing, meaning um, once that person or a group of people realizes they need to pull that switch, it's probably too late because AI obviously runs on electricity, right? And electricity moves at the speed of light. So by the time you decide to hit that kill switch, you're probably too late. So that's my main. You could turn off the entire electric grid, but it doesn't mean that China will. So I think that point that you made is a really great point. And yeah, the proposal targets companies earning at least $500 million annually from AI. I don't know if that's profits or total revenue. if it's profits, that's not a lot of companies.
3, right? I guess.
2, OpenAI not included. Yeah, and using more than $100 million dollars in compute power. So yeah, that's that's the main thing. It's targeting bigger companies, and then also who's gonna have control over that kill switch.
So this, listening to you there, this sounds to me like the US government wanting to effectively have power over these massive organizations to say, hey, if you don't toe the line, like no matter what political party's in power, if you don't toe the line to what we're thinking, we're going to shut you down. Like that's how I read this, rather than for the sake of humanity, we've got this like giant. I imagine in my head, right, the kill switches. You know those like old school films where there's like Frankenstein got this like switch that you just pull down in case in case of supremacy, in case of AI supremacy, break glass, pull switch, right? That's how they're selling it, but that will never work for the reasons you talked about. And for me, actually, this feels like the administration leaning on these companies saying, hey, toe the line, otherwise we're gonna cut you out. And one of the ways in which you could toe the line is to give us an equity share in your organization, which certain AI companies might be doing, right?
Certain, yeah. Yeah. Aside from like shutting down the whole electric grid, I don't see if you really want to like talk about this seriously, and I don't know how near in the future this might be, but we've already. I don't think maybe I spoke to you about this, Sam, about how there was a controlled experiment where they showed that AI agents can copy themselves, basically
Yeah.
clone themselves. So like probably in the near future, that's a possibility of if not already, that that can happen without us being able to tell. A lot of these models can be quantized now into very small forms, and therefore kind of move a little bit better undetected without all the compute power that we think is necessary. So unless you shut down the electric grid, in the future in terms of like actually something serious. People like sometimes joke around and say Skynet. Like if that's what the future might look like, there's no way to really stop this unless you stop the
I mean,
electricity.
and a kill switch isn't going to work, right? And you know, as people in the chat have pointed out, like data centers have these, but they're mainly to like prevent a power surge or something like this. And how are you going to how are you going to simultaneously turn off the 500 plus data centers in the US, let alone all of the data centers outside of the US that actually run the US models, right? It's just, it honestly, make the analogy of the kill switch for the internet. It can't happen. It couldn't happen. And it's positioning, it's postulating, and it's nonsense from politicians that really should know better as well.
Yeah.
Moving on to politicians that should know better, our fifth story, a recurring theme, and again, bringing us back to the United Kingdom. I was going to ask you to pronounce one of these councils, but it's mean, so I'm not going to do it, okay?
I'll try.
Yeah, but we've talked in here several times about Palantir and how Palantir in the UK have a £330 million contract with the National Health Service, which is our National Health Trust, to provide something called the Federated Data Platform, which is basically to try to sort out the IT infrastructure and databases across all of our various NHS trusts. So, you know, roughly speaking, each region has an NHS trust, which kind of acts independently of one another, and then they form a giant conglomerate, which we have, you know, free healthcare in this country. And don't get me wrong, the infrastructure is a mess and it does need sorting out. However, Palantir, you know, are a US-based company. This is all true. They set up as a branch of the CIA's investment arm, actually. And why does the UK think it is a good idea to hand over health security clearance and records, theoretically, of every British person to an American security company? Does that company really care about the £330 million? Or does that company think to itself, we've got that contract, we've got that data, we don't care how we deliver, even if we never get the money, we've got the data of 70, 80 million people, which is worth way more than £330 million. Okay. So Sheffield, which is a city in the United Kingdom, they have a council, like local elected council. They've actually voted against Palantir in their local NHS trust. And what's really interesting, and they want to reject the contract. What's really interesting, Leor, is in doing so, they found a break clause in the main contract with the UK government and Palantir, which states something along the lines of, if a publicly owned organization can provide this service to the UK NHS trusts, then we will break the contract from Palantir and we will give it to this other company instead. So that begs the question, why the hell are we not investing in this country in creating that? We probably have some of the expertise to enable us to do that as well. And other councils as well have started to reject and looking to kick Palantir out. So for me, this is really, really positive. I just want to, can you pronounce the name of the city beginning with R that's down there? I want to see how you say that. This is me being very mean.
The city beginning with R. To be honest, I have my own notes pulled up. I don't have the original. How about you pronounce it and I'll try.
Okay. Rotherham. How would you say that?
Rotherham.
Very good. Very good. Basically British. So, Rotherham, Greater Manchester, Sheffield, like all rejecting, pushing back. This is like a huge win. But again, it points to this massive issue of data sovereignty and something we need to take a lot more seriously in the UK and elsewhere. Would love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I do, I will say that point that you made about how Palantir doesn't need 300 million, it's actually true. And I think that's really a great point. The data is worth much more. I think Palantir is worth like a couple or a few $100 billion at this point. So
you would know, they're in your share index.
Yeah, I should know. That's actually one of my biggest regrets. I won't get into too much about it, but let's just say I used to own many shares of Palantir when it was trading for much less, and I had to sell them all to get into my first house. That aside, I think that my main take here is this, and this works for US and for UK. Now I understand that it works in the UK as well. Local government is underrated. That's where the people actually have more control over outcomes that directly affect them. So I think local government is greater in terms of outcome versus national. And I think this shows that exactly. And I think it should stay that way. I think that big government should have less control and small government should have more control. And I'm glad to see that play out this way. I will say, just to kind of give both sides of the story here, though, in terms of what Palantir was offering to do. Excuse me while I read off some notes here. So the NHS, these are the areas that they cover. First of all, it's like hospital beds, waiting lists, staff rosters, medical supplies, social care, all that type of good stuff, all good stuff. And here are the claim benefits with Palantir. There's a couple main ones that I wanted to read off here. So surgical scheduling windows extended from 3 weeks to 5 weeks, a 36% reduction in hospital stays lasting at least 21 days, and approximately 90 staff hours saved each week. So I think when you look at it from that perspective as well, you realize, okay, well, what's the trade-off? And at the end of the day, local governments and the people that are voting in those municipalities, they have the control to make that decision, which I like. But at the same time, I hope that they're not making that decision because of how they feel about Palantir versus not looking at the statistics of how it can help their community at all.
It's a fair point. And to push back against that, part of the reason they're also rejecting it is that Palantir have not been delivering on this. So, those statistics are, if someone could offer that, of course, that's really good. And those people have probably weighed up. Yeah, our data is very precious, but actually, if you could get waiting times down by that percentage, maybe that is worth the trade-off, yeah? But if you look at the reports that have come out, Palantir, the number of operations have actually gone down. The quality of the service is nowhere near what's there. So my hypothesis, and it's just a hypothesis, is that Palantir purposefully lowballed the bid, right? They lowballed what they were going to offer, because this obviously had to go out to tenure, I would hope, because it's 330 million. And they said, we can do this to 330 million. We can do all of these amazing things. And Palantir actually has quite a good track record of doing some good, like actually effective IT infrastructure work. And then, as I've said, just a hypothesis, maybe they thought, it doesn't matter what we say. We don't care if we don't deliver this. Look at all this data we're going to get. And any company, any organization, any government needs to think very carefully that data only exists once, and it is almost invaluable. And as AI models keep burning through data, like that original data use is going to become more and more precious. And the UK's like health records, I'm not saying this as a British person, they're one of the most valuable in the world because they go back so long and they've always been in public ownership rather than private hands. And this is the whole battle between public and private health in the UK as well, because people want that data for various reasons. So yeah, that's the only thing I push back on. I would agree with you that if those statistics prove to be true, there is a question to be had about the trade-off, but we're already seeing from factual evidence and anecdotal reports from people working in these trusts that Palantir just aren't delivering. And I guess that's what they're ultimately going to be able to push back on.
Are they not delivering in places that they're already implemented, or are they not delivering in these municipalities in the UK because they haven't been implemented yet?
They're not delivering in the places where they have been implemented.
Okay.
So the studies I saw that the places where they have been implemented, the actual the number of operations has actually decreased. So yeah, and again, I'll link to the full study in the show notes that accompany this, so people can look at it as well. But yeah, wow, it felt like we covered a lot of ground today. Is there, from AI detection all the way through to the the issues around Palantir. Is there anything you wanted to say that we haven't had a chance to cover, Leor?
No, I mean, honestly, I felt like we could have done the whole like I mentioned to you before the stream, we could have done the whole podcast on AI detectors. I think that we probably had more to say on that note, but maybe we were scared that we wouldn't get through all the other topics in the time frame that we have. I did see someone in the chat earlier on ask about how we feel about the disable button. So I want to get your opinion on that. I am actually using it every time. And also, I think that the disable button should be a feature that you just have like in your settings in your dashboard where you could just turn it on and it's on instead of having to do it for every post. But also,
this is the disable AI scan. So you can disable for your posts whether people can or cannot scan your post with Pangram. And at the moment, you have to remember to turn it off for every post rather than it be an automatic thing that's applied across your entire stack.
Right. And yeah, I just will mention, I'm not going to mention any names or any creators, but I will say I'm happy that I've been transparent through the whole process, even before this came out. I honestly never saw this coming. Maybe Sam did, but I'm happy that I've been transparent. I definitely noticed a lot of creators out there that weren't, that were on the side of more so like I write everything that I write. Even if I insert an AI image into my article, I'm going to write underneath that AI image that's AI generated, even though it obviously is. But like, I think transparency was like, so that's why I'm not totally mad about this.
No, for
I
sure,
agree
man.
It doesn't work, but transparency.
And I think we need to have the dialogue. And as Chad points out in the chat, like, in fairness, Substack have rolled back on this a bit because it used to be you had to scan everything before you could turn it off, and you don't have to do that now. You can turn off AI detection before you scan it yourself. So let's just keep having the dialogue and the discussion, and hopefully we'll settle on something that suits all writers and authors. And as Leor said, being transparent is the big win here, I think.
Yeah. What do you think about the disable button, by the way?
I'm purposely at the moment leaving it on, but that's because I just can't be bothered dealing with all the trolls who are going to come at me and tell me, oh, of course you're hiding it because you're not a real human, you're a bot. I mean, the amount of people that tell me that I'm not a real human. Like, if I was not a real human, I would have much better teeth. I would have given myself much better teeth than this for a start, right? Like, so let's just leave it at that. Yeah, so I'm going to leave mine on for the time being, but that might change, Leo. And do you know why it might change? Because I'm a human being who flip-flops and changes their opinion based on evidence and the needs of my audience as well. So hopefully that's okay with everyone.
Perfectly fine.
Thanks everyone. Like, loads of people joining the chat. Thanks for a rich discussion. This post will be up soon. Really appreciate it. Thanks for joining. And Leo, thank you as ever, my friend.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate everybody.
Thanks everyone. Stay safe. Go slow.